Hey, and welcome to the first ever episode of the Creating Happiness podcast. My name's Anya, I'm 23 years old, and the idea for this podcast or some form of content creation is something that I've been sitting on for well over a year now. I finished my undergrad degree in music about 6 weeks ago. I'm a violinist, and since the age of 14, so almost 10 years ago now, I decided that it was my absolute dream and it was going to be my life's goal to become a professional violinist and get a job in an orchestra. And my uni degree was a 4-year course and I took a year out in between. So really conveniently, in about March, I think 4 months before I was supposed to graduate, I decided that I wasn't sure anymore if that was what I wanted to pursue. So I said to myself after my exams were done, I was going to take a 6-week break from employment and definitely education. I wasn't going to think about master's programs or anything, and just spend some time working out what I really enjoy, what makes me happy, what energizes me, what I'm good at. And after about 2 weeks of being a couch potato, I felt this desire to have some sort of project to work towards, to be doing something that had a sort of end goal in sight. And I didn't know what that was going to be to start with, but I do have this really keen interest in self-development and self-help books, self-help content. I'm a massive fan of all those podcasts and YouTube videos, and I have not an embarrassing number. I have an impressive number of Google Docs saved on my laptop full of notes on podcasts I've listened to and books I've read and things I've seen on TikTok and Instagram. And it started to fill up my day. This was all I was doing, was just taking in this stuff and writing down things that stuck out to me. And I started to get this desire to compile it and create something of my own from it. I love learning about just how much it is possible for us to change ourselves as people and change our lives and make ourselves happier and better people for ourselves and others. And so I decided that was what I wanted to focus this on. I think I've experienced what it's like to be at both ends of the spectrum of mental well-being, in terms of I've been diagnosed depressed, but I've also experienced sustained periods of time where I have felt so happy to wake up every day and so blessed and excited to live my life in my body and my brain. And I've definitely learned a thing or two along the way at each end and in between about what pushes me from one end to the other and vice versa. And all I want from this is just to be able to share some of the knowledge that I've been lucky enough to come across and some of my own conclusions that I've come to from making connections between bits of information I've heard or read and my own life experiences. And if I could share all of that and just one person could benefit from something that I say, and for it to help them move towards this end of the spectrum that I feel like I'm experiencing currently, that would just be my world. That's the ultimate goal. There have been so many times where I've just been unable to imagine that life could be and feel as good as it does right now. And this right now is something that I want everyone to be able to experience. I believe really strongly that we all have the power to change our lives, to make ourselves happier, to change the way we think and perceive the world, and therefore the way that we respond to things that happen to us and around us on a day-to-day basis. But because it's not something that is widely discussed or certainly taught at a school level, it's not something that a lot of us are aware of. I think we aren't all automatically aware that we have this internal toolkit that can be put to use, and we certainly often don't know how to use anything inside of it. And when I talk about changing our lives, I don't mean by acquiring anything new externally or getting to new life points as such. So I'm not talking about changing our finances or changing our relationships or moving out of home or leaving uni or getting a new job. It's an internal job that we all have the power to take on. And it's not to say that these things don't and can't have a huge impact on our lives, because obviously they can. Our finances and our relationships can have a massive effect on how happy we are and our lifestyles and what our day-to-day lives look like. So, for example, specifically when it comes to finances, the research that I've seen that's gone into this comes out saying that once we have enough money to fund the fundamentals, like food and a safe shelter, anything we earn beyond that doesn't actually have a significant impact on our base emotional state from day to day, which I think is interesting to think about, especially in relation to the lottery winners, because it helps explain why a lot of them end up actually quite miserable after the initial excitement of the big lifestyle change and the millions of pounds that they have coming in sort of wears off, because once this excitement does dip, they revert back to the sort of emotional baseline state that they were living at before. And this means they have to deal with the crushing disappointment of having their expectations unfulfilled, because I think people do expect that when they become rich overnight, it will make them happy. So there is that unfulfilled dream, the disappointment, and they now also have to deal with the loss of hope because the dreams failed to grant them the desired result. So while these things do impact us, it doesn't do to rely on them to dictate our quality of life and our day-to-day emotional state. So aside from the fact that they can often be ineffective, external things are also frequently out of our control, especially when we think about our relationships. We can't control other people. So they're not reliable sources to rely on for our happiness. And they're also really poor solutions to our internal problems. So if you think about someone who is desperate for a partner, desperate for the perfect partner who loves them unconditionally, or just anybody in general, a romantic relationship, even if they met someone and ended up in a relationship with someone who did love them unconditionally and ticked all of their boxes, was perfect for them, fulfilled all their needs, if they had a core belief that they were unlovable and, you know, the perfect relationship was something that was outside of the realms of possibility for them, it wasn't meant for them, it wouldn't matter how much evidence this person gave them that they loved them and that this was a relationship they were in, their brain would reject it because they've been living with this belief for so long that that's not true. So they wouldn't trust the love they were receiving and they wouldn't be able to believe that they were being loved. Another example that comes to mind is people who rely on external achievements to validate their self-worth or to feel a sense of self-worth, because they think that when they achieve the next thing, so it could be a first-class degree, they think when I've achieved that, I'll be happy and I'll feel content in myself. I feel like I've done enough. But that's not how it works, because if your belief is that your self-worth is determined by your achievements, it's not a case of once you've achieved that one thing, a switch goes off in your brain and you're able to feel happy and able to feel that sense of self-worth. You have to keep proving to yourself that you are enough with more achievements. So once you've got that thing, the goalposts just move and you're continuously chasing this sense of fulfillment and happiness and self-worth. If you are dissatisfied and or disillusioned with your life, nobody can change that but you. You are the only one with the power to take the necessary action, to make the necessary change, and you can look up to other people for motivation and inspiration, and you can allow yourself to be led to water, so to speak, but you're the only one who can drink it. You have to take responsibility for identifying what is contributing to your dissatisfaction with life and what brings you peace and joy, and take the appropriate next steps, both externally, so who and what circumstances are having a negative or positive impact on your life, and internally, so what mindsets, habitual thought patterns, and beliefs about yourself and the world are affecting you. Another trap I think lots of us fall into is delaying our happiness. So we place it in the future when we get the degree, or even when we leave uni or get a different job or change our living situations. We say that we'll achieve happiness at some point in the future. But what we're doing when we say this, either out loud or internally, is we're just denying ourselves the possibility of having it in the present. This firstly ensures that we'll be unhappy now, and it secondly guarantees that we don't consider the possibility that we have the ability to do anything about it, and therefore let alone take any action towards changing it. This is definitely something that I've experienced before, specifically when I moved to uni. I think that was the time where it was most notably affecting me. I was not a happy teenager, which I don't think is hard for anybody to imagine. I think we get rough gigs as teens. And I had this dream. I had my dream university in mind. And because I had exams, I had my GCSEs and A-levels, I had something throughout my later teen years to get me up each morning. I had goals to work towards. And I felt this base level of unhappiness. But I had this beacon of light in the future, right, of moving to the dream university. And I thought that's when everything will change, and that's when I will feel happy with my life. And I went to uni, and a lot of things did change. Obviously my living situation changed because I went and moved to my uni city. I had my own space, which I loved, and I think I thrived off in some ways. I was studying what I wanted to study. So my dream course on the instrument that I loved, I was surrounded by much more like-minded people who had the same passions as I did. There were loads of things that were great. But what I hadn't ever thought about, naturally, because I was 18, was that I would be taking all of my problems that I had before with me, and the change hadn't equipped me with any new skill sets or any new knowledge to be able to handle them any better. And so when problems cropped up, I almost had this sense of shock, because it was like this was meant to be the fix. How am I still getting upset? How am I still having bad days? How am I feeling this sense of unhappiness? So there were so many things that were still causing me issues that I hadn't addressed and didn't even know were issues to be addressed. But it resulted in things like when I didn't come top of my department in the assessments at the end of the first term, didn't know how to handle it. When I continued to feel this sense of social anxiety and unease, and I felt horrendous before, during and after pretty much every social interaction I had for that first year. I still didn't know how to handle it because I still had all these internal problems. And of course, with big life changes, new problems cropped up, which I didn't have before. So my whole concept of self-worth relied almost entirely on external validation for a very long time. And that was slightly easier to cope with before uni because I was somewhat a big fish in a small pond. And I did get lots of external validation through high academic achievements and sometimes special attention from teachers because of that. And when I got to uni and I was nothing more than middle of the pack and I didn't stand out as especially talented. I mean, we were all talented to be studying what we were studying at degree level, but it was suddenly I was one amongst many, and to be honest, I probably wasn't even middle of a pack. I was pretty much bottom of it to start with. So I'd lost this safety net, essentially, of being an overachiever. And albeit it was a dysfunctional one, but it was something to hold on to, and I had that ripped from underneath me. And the big problem underlying all of these things was that my self-worth was poor and I was not treating myself well. Internally, in terms of the way I was speaking to myself, was not setting me up for happiness or success. And externally, in terms of my lifestyle, was not setting me up for success or happiness. I was rife with disordered eating habits. My sleep schedule was horrendous / non-existent. My time management was piss poor. My work-life balance was really bad in terms of it was sort of all or nothing on either side, none of which was helping. And I think lots of it stemmed from lack of knowledge and understanding. Quite a lot of it probably also stemmed from lack of self-respect. And it didn't matter how much genuine love I received from the incredible people around me and the really positive relationships I did have. None of it was going to make a dent in my belief that essentially I wasn't worth it. So bearing in mind that I think it is so rare for a change in lifestyle to eliminate any previous problems that you had, and the fact that they can bring new and unanticipated problems, I think it is much more empowering for all of us to address what we can about our life in the now and create happiness where we are. I think for a lot of people, and it definitely has been for me in the past, it can be really confronting to even think about or hear about people talking about change, because we get defensive and we perceive it as either an attack on our lifestyle or a criticism of our ego. And consequently, I think a lot of us end up falling into the if this then that trap. So we say things like, if this circumstance was different, if I had more money, if I had more time, if I was naturally more outgoing, if I was naturally more motivated, if I wasn't lacking in some way, either internally in terms of desired characteristics or in terms of circumstances, I could be happy, my life could be different. And what we're doing when we justify our life or ourselves being the way that we are is we're almost framing it as if it's out of our control, and this protects us, right? It protects us from the possibility of there being another problem that's harder to realise, or the possibility of if we addressed it and were honest about it and tried to take appropriate action and change, there's the possibility that we would fail. So we're protecting ourselves from the possibility of failure by not addressing it or trying. And it gives us hope, right? If we say, oh, if this, then that, it gives us hope that one day we can address the if. But it's a completely false hope if we guarantee ourselves that we never act on it. No amount of failures are ever going to rule out a future success, but inaction always will. Never starting something will always guarantee us losing, and our hopes will just remain pipe dreams. It could also be that we're not even scared of failure, we're just scared of the unpleasantries that are involved in taking action, especially if we're trying to do something that we've not done before, that's new, that's uncertain, that's scary, that's uncomfortable. Our defenses justify us staying in our current state and not having to confront that, which is completely natural because at least part of our brain is wired specifically for our survival, and hence it drives us away from anything that is new or scary or it thinks will be potentially painful. There's comfort in what we know, even if what we know day to day is making us deeply unhappy. It's a real life case of better the devil you know, but devils really don't make for good safety blankets. The example that always comes to mind with this is I think about how many people are out there seriously lonely, and I've definitely been there myself at times. I think that's probably why I think about it first, is because it definitely applies to me, and it's something I still struggle to take action on, as in it's an area of my life that I think I struggle to be completely honest with myself about, because it's nerve-wracking and it's scary. People are scared of rejection because, again, it's a survival thing, right? Thousands of years ago, if we were rejected by our tribes, our chances of survival were very slim. So our brain is deathly afraid of rejection in any form. People are scared of the possibility that there's not somebody out there who can relate to them and understand them in the way that they want, be it in a romantic partnership or in a friendship. You know, people are scared of that failure of, I'm doing my bunny ears because failures aren't really failures. But they're scared of the possibility of being unsuccessful, of not finding their people. Or they're just scared of feeling inferior or inadequate in social situations. So they give excuses, right, to protect themselves from their fears, to justify inaction. They think that, oh, well, I'm just not naturally sociable or outgoing, or, well, I just don't have the innate ability to talk to strangers. It's not something I was born with, or even, well, it's not a me problem. People just don't like me. I'm not invited into circles. I'm not accepted. People, it's other people, right? So with all these excuses, they're telling themselves that it's something that's out of their control. It's something that they can't change. And subconsciously or consciously, they've decided that staying where they are and not doing anything about it is the best possible option for them. It's the most comfortable, the most predictable, the least painful, the safest. So they stay in these lovely metaphorical cages that they've built for themselves. You know, they're gold-plated, they're gilded, they're very nice and pretty on the inside. But cages are still cages. But we all have the power to get out of the restrictions that we've built around ourselves. You put yourself behind those bars, you are the only one who can get yourself out from behind them, even if it is extremely painful and time-consuming to do so. And if we do, our big scary fears might come true. In fact, some of them probably will. We're all going to face rejection at some point. It might take us a very long time to find our people, and we might have to deal with the very real possibility of spending extended periods of time wondering when or if we're actually going to find them. But something else that I'm sure most of us have all heard before is that failures aren't ever failures. I hate the word failure. There's no such thing, really. They're only ever lessons or incidents to collect data, collect information from. They tell us what didn't work for us and help us decide what to change next time or moving forward. At some point, you have to get really real with yourself and decide what scares you more. Is it living the rest of your life the way that you are now? Or is it facing the unknown and facing the big, bad, ugly, scary fears that are outside of the cage, but knowing that it is within the realms of possibility for you to get to whatever's on the other side and to face them and conquer them. And I think that's worth it for everybody. So those are just some of the things that I think hold us back or keep us stuck in a state of inaction. But I do think the biggest one that affects us all communally is that we just don't know how. I think most people don't have or haven't come across the knowledge on how to change or what to change because, like I said earlier, it's not taught, it's not prioritised. And although there is a lot of free information out there now on the internet, on podcasts, on YouTube, in books, I think you do have to do a lot of sifting through it, especially to start with, to find things that serve beyond just being motivational and inspiring and actually provide us with action steps that we can start taking to get the ball rolling slightly. And then even in areas where we do know what to do, like take for example exercise, right? I think it's probably one of the most obvious things that most of us know will do us good. Physically, it will do us good mentally, and it is very easy to find free information online. I mean, you only have to Google 20-minute workout, do that a couple of times a week, and you know that that would benefit you. But people still don't do it. And I've seen a lot of self-help content saying that it's so easy to be great and win nowadays because people are soft, right? And people are lazy and people know what they need to do, they just don't want to do it. And that's on them. And I really don't agree with this. I think that some people know what they need to do and most people want it on some level. Some part of their brain wants to do it, but they don't feel like doing it and they don't know and they don't have the skill set to be able to get past that. And that, I think, is huge and something that everybody could benefit from taking on as a new perspective and things. And I think certainly it's one of the biggest things that started to shift things for me and really helped me start making significant forward progress. That perspective shift and that piece of knowledge is something that I think can be game-changing when it is approached and tackled correctly. And it's one of the things that I'm most keen about to talk in near future episodes. I have this old friend that I used to have some really great conversations with, and I can't remember if this conversation actually stemmed from the whole convo around embarrassment and the fact that embarrassment isn't real. It's a made-up social concept, which I will go into another time. But anyway, this is along the same lines as that. So I remember him saying to me that he didn't think laziness was real. And I was like, what are you on? And he said that laziness, when you think about it, is just resistance to discomfort and taking action or inaction according to that. I just think it's a really interesting start point for a useful conversation, really. I think you can say that laziness is a character flaw or undesirable trait that people have, and that it's an unwillingness to suffer, essentially, through pain or discomfort. Or you can look at these people who exhibit quote-unquote lazy behaviour, and you can say, well, to an extent, our brain is wired for this, and it's just a case that they haven't yet come across the knowledge or skill set necessary to effectively manage that part of their brain. So when you frame it like that, it's not about people's characters or about shaming or judging or blaming or saying that anything is fixed, right? Because if we say people are inherently lazy, that suggests that it's fixed. It's a flaw that they're stuck with, that they can't do anything about. And I just think it's a more productive way of framing it, saying that it's a skill set, actually, managing the parts of our brain that hold us back in many areas of life. And skills are things that can be learned by anybody at any age. I think that approach is much more productive and conducive to success than shaming. I think change that is catalysed by shame, specifically if the shame then continues to be the motivator going forward, can cause more problems than you potentially had when you started, especially if it then becomes internalised. And that's kind of what I want the podcast to be about, really, is just sharing the knowledge and the skills that I've come across and learned that have helped me manage my own brain and steer my thoughts and my actions in a direction that helps me stay happy and create success and a high standard of living for myself. There's a term called neurogenesis, and I am ripping this straight out of Shelby Sacco's podcast. She's absolutely brilliant. She's got a podcast called Sad to Savage, and it's all essentially about habit building and behaviour change through changing habits. And what neurogenesis refers to is the brain's ability to breed new neurons, and that can happen at any age. Changing our behaviour or thought patterns or habits leads to new neurons being created in the brain. It literally causes physical changes up there, which I don't know, I just like it as a little fact, I guess. It serves as a reminder that this isn't all woo-woo stuff. Like, there is actual evidence that people can change things about themselves. We have the power to change not just external things, but internally, we have the ability to change ourselves, our personalities, our dispositions, and our worldviews. They're all shapeable with the necessary mindset shifts and action, and we are all capable of changing these things to make ourselves happier. And it is scary. Challenging our brains is scary. It's not comfortable. I'm scared putting out this podcast, to be honest. It's not something I feel like doing, because when I think about how I feel scared, I feel nervous that everybody I know is going to message me when this goes out on the internet and say, Anya, what are you playing at? This is embarrassing, this is stupid, you're not intelligent enough to be talking about this stuff, who do you think you are? But I know logically and reasonably that even if that does happen, and even if everybody I knew reached out to me and said that, and they're not, because people have their own lives to tend to, it is within my power to choose which subjective opinions about me I take on and believe. And actually, I'm going to read the next bit straight off my notes because there's no way I'm going to articulate it probably as well as I've written it down here. But I get to decide that I have something to say, and I'm always going to have been better off for facing my fears and pushing the boundaries of my comfort zone, because ultimately, the more I push at that and the wider I make it by doing more scary and uncomfortable things, the freer I am, the more options are open to me, and the more magical my life potentially could be. So the worst case scenario is that my fears come true and all these people message me or tell me to my face that what I'm doing is embarrassing and a terrible idea. But I still have the ability to decide my opinion on that, whether I think it's true, whether I take it on, and I will still have achieved the goal of expanding my comfort zone and be gaining all the benefits from that. That's a worst case scenario. And the best case scenario is that I don't get any negative feedback. I might even get some positive feedback from people, and I might achieve what I really want from this, which is to help someone, even if it's just in a tiny way. So when you put those two scenarios side by side, to me, it's a no-brainer whether to choose inaction and let fear stop me from putting this out there, or to go down the path of expansion and freedom, which is to throw this out on the internet and essentially say, fuck it. It doesn't matter if anybody else likes this. I'm going to stick at it for as long as it's conducive to my happiness, and as long as I still think I have something potentially worth saying and sharing. And a last thing worth mentioning that we've definitely all heard is that nobody cares that much about you, and even when people do, because people will laugh and judge others. Judge others. It's part of human nature, right? But even when they do judge and say or think or share nasty things, they're not thinking about it when they go to sleep at night. So they don't care that much, even if they do temporarily. And people will forget, and it says everything about their relationship with themselves and nothing objective about you. When people judge and say nasty things about others and put other people down, it is literally in an attempt to knock people down off the hierarchical, is that a word? Social ladder, whatever you'd call it, because people who do those things view relationships with others as vertical instead of horizontal, right? If our relationships are on a horizontal plane, we're all equal. And I think that's the goal, is to view relationships with other people like that. But if you are stuck in viewing relationships as vertical, if somebody is above you, by definition, you are beneath them. And that is a problem, and it's an insult to the ego. So when people judge and say unpleasant things, it is in a literal attempt to knock you down so that they can therefore be on top. They're trying to keep themselves safe. That says everything about them. It says nothing about you. Pretty much everything I've touched on today, I'd like to speak about in more depth in future. So if you've enjoyed any part of this or learned anything from it, or just liked watching or listening to me making a tit out of myself trying this out for the first time, then it'd be lush if you could tune in again next week. You can subscribe on YouTube or follow on Spotify, and follow my socials, which I'll link in the episode description. I love you all and hope you have great weeks, and hopefully speak to you again.